Hello, I'm Penelope Maver, and welcome to Earth Converse podcast, where we explore our relationship and conversations with the Earth, all in the hope of inspiring a deeper connection with ourselves, each other, and the Earth that is our home. And today, I've got Jim Marsden here, also from Boulder, Colorado, that Jenny Daly Gunter is. And I mentioned Jim, he doesn't know this already, but on Earth episode 11, where I said that Al Harrison from Wild Courage introduced us, and Jim introduced me to Bill Plotkin's work, Soulcraft and Wild Mind, which really started sort of the deepening, the foundation of that. And he also introduced me to Theory U, that's Otto Scharmer's work, in the Presencing Institute. And he's so humble, he didn't even tell me he was like a cool member of their foundation. And so Jim navigates corporate and entrepreneurial worlds with flair. And he's a coach, he's a facilitator, he's a vision quest guide. And he was with Hewlett-Packard. We met, we were doing some work for Al and for Wild Courage and for Unilever. And I think we got lost in Shanghai looking for ice cream.
That's right.
And now he's a coach with fantastic organization, a coaching company called Reboot. I'll put all links in there, and Jim's biography and everything. But I want to know his story, and I want you to hear his story. So I guess I'm going to go linear before I go for a big question, Jim. Hi.
All righty.
Yeah. So where do we start? And is it an early childhood memory of the connecting with nature, or your own connection on this earth and what you are to do?
That's a great question. I think it has me wondering what the answer to that is as well. Where I go, there were some early childhood connections there. One of the things, I grew up in Michigan, and my mom in the early years was a stay-at-home mom, and my dad at that time owned a camera store. And I was busy just growing up in a number of ways and wasn't paying attention to too much else that was going on. But one of the things that we did for a number of years is we went up to kind of the upper part of the lower peninsula, and every Michigander will do, hey, do you see this? We're up here, and show you on the map. We used to go to a place on Lake Charlevoix, and that just seemed like a magical time. It was a time to be outside. Even now I can remember the smells of what was there and what was in the air. Some of the pine trees and the smell of water and lake and beach and all of that. And so being up there, I think, was a time to just be able to connect with things that were just outside of the norm of the regular day-to-day back in Kalamazoo was where I grew up. So there are early.
Is there?
What's that?
Is
yes, there is.
Oh my God, it's so cool.
For a while, there was even a campaign that was, yes, there really is a Kalamazoo. That's really funny. But yeah.
Oh, brilliant! I thought that was an urban myth. Oh,
yeah, that's right. Yeah, a bit of a big band song and a number of things, but it's pretty funny.
Actually,
yeah, there is.
When I was in, was it Utah or Colorado, that I drove to a place intentionally because they've got a town called Paradox. So I wanted.
Oh yeah, Colorado. Yeah.
Oh
yeah.
Oh my God, the coolest names. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But if I fast forward, that might have been some of the earliest memories, really, aside from climbing trees and hanging out, in the yards just around my house, which all those two were great. Walking along the beaches at that time along Lake Michigan, you could find Petoskey stones, and for a while there we had a little lapidary set up where we would make dolphins and hearts, out of the Petoskey stones that we would find. And it was kind of magical to be looking at these rocks and be staring, thousands of years back in time to see the shells that had come together that are part of the Petoskey. But
do you have a sense of that? Is that an adult self looking in, or was it childhood wonder going where they're from? Even
it was definitely a childhood wonder. It was, part of it, and others might be able to relate to this as well. No matter what shoreline you're on, it's the experiences of walking kind of in a timeless part of the day, whether it's morning or afternoon or evening, really, and almost any time. But it's when you might, I remember it as when I was more kind of on my own, and the waves lapping up against the shore, almost with a bit of a rhythm, to it. But looking and seeing, exploring, what's here in the sand, and seeing the bits and pieces, and then every once in a while seeing a Petoskey stone, and going, wow, and just hanging out with that for a bit to see what is this shape, how is that, is it like anything else that I've seen before, is it unlike, in what ways, I mean, just really just taking it in, just kind of a timeless thing that way. And even just naming it that, and that kind of experience takes me to other places, of other seashores, of walking along different sandy beaches in the Carolinas and feeling the sand and the breeze and what sea salt feels like, or down in, I think it's around Venice Beach, was the shark tooth capital of the world for in Florida, and looking for shark teeth that were there in the sands as well, and kind of the magical world that was. Uh, but in, kind of fast forwarding, there were, busier times going through school and college, and I went to college at Kalamazoo College, and then University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. And it feels like my life got really busy, and there was more of a periodic connection with nature, and something that was, and maybe even in some ways, almost taken for granted. Like, it was really wonderful to have, but not as much of a serious, direct relationship. Until there was a time where I'd been living in Italy, and was helping a startup inside of HP, inside of Hewlett-Packard, to get going. It was a division of Hewlett-Packard, and that was really demanding. I was married. I have two daughters. They were little ones, just starting school in Italian schools. I was super, super busy, and when we moved back, I felt like I was out of alignment with my life in a number of ways. It had been really rich, a lot to be grateful for, but just something wasn't quite square. So I decided that I needed to take a break, and I talked to my manager at HP, and was sharing, here's what's going on. I can still do some work, but it just feels off. And he was a super, super guy, and gave me the clearance to just go take some time off. So, yeah.
Is it like a burnout? Is it, was it stress? Was it?
It wasn't quite burnout. It was there, although in hindsight, I see there was a ton that's overlapping with being a workaholic in a number of ways. It was more like something out of alignment, which I also see as connected with burnout. But with burnout, I feel like I can't do anything anymore. It didn't quite get to that place. It was, it was, I felt like I was too entrenched in the business dynamics that were in play in the world that I was a part of. And I knew that the world was more than that. And I felt a bit disconnected. I even felt at that point, in hindsight as well, I could see that I was connecting in a number of ways with my wife and kids, but even there, it's just like, something not quite square. And yet I didn't know exactly what it was. So it was more of like a profound feeling of something off, and and I did, but I also, because it wasn't really burnout or exhaustion, I just felt like I needed to shift my perspective, and I want to do something kind of radically different at that point, and just really, it's almost like I wanted the world to grab me by the shoulders and shake me a bit, to just see if I could get out of my own.
A good,
yeah,
universal chiropractor or something.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. It's like get a good alignment, and kind of break through the crust in a way. And at the same time, wasn't anything really bad or wrong about where I was stuck, but I knew I was stuck, in some way.
Can I ask how old you were at that time? I'm thinking midlife crisis, or a typical journey. People, typically go through, they work hard, hard the 20s and working with family.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot do travel, and that's a real combination, isn't it? Starting up something in the business, starting a family in a new country, all that. And then at some point going, whew, okay.
Yeah, for sure. So I was right around 38, 39, and about 38, and um, there were a number of things. It had just been, and even in the moment, I could look over my shoulder and say, "Dude, you've been running hot for quite a quite a while." And there was a bit of an addiction to it too, of like, and I love it. Part of what I was doing was learning just incredibly rapidly, and I was doing a lot of what I really love to do, and so it wasn't black and white. And at the same time, there's something not square. There's something missing that I could feel, but my brain didn't know, and I didn't have ways of actually going direct to address it. I couldn't solve it as if it were a problem to be solved. So at that point too, I knew then I needed to get out of the center of gravity that I was in, the perspective, and get a different perspective.
It's courageous though to listen into that, like not know what it is, and so
Yeah, there's some other things that I had some help for sure. My wife and I, this all really started to peak when I came back, when we moved back from having been in Italy for about 5 years. My wife and I at the time had decided what we do is take a little bit of a break, see what we wanted, and then go from there. But when I got back, I immediately got involved with merger and acquisition activity, and that was asking that I be in Santa Monica, California. And when we had just moved back into our house in Colorado, and it just meant I was traveling a bunch. I was traveling so much. This is kind of a funny sub story, but I would stay at this bed and breakfast, and it got to the point where I could call them from Colorado and ask them to leave a key to my room under their front door mat. And I had a mountain bike that I left there, so that's how much I was traveling. Yeah, so I could see there, it's like, and you hopped right back on the horse, no time at all to really get grounded. And there's something there too, where it's like this, I could see where it's going, and it's not that great, although aspects of it were wonderful. So what I ended up doing, I decided at the time, kind of the best shot that I had. I didn't know a whole lot about different options, but I wanted to do something radically different, and there was something of a call or pull back to nature. And I wanted to do something I could do with my age and fitness that I might not be able to do, much later. So I took about 2 months off and went on a trek in Pakistan throughout the Karakorum mountain range. And um, it was amazing. It was super, in many ways, it was I see it now as a bit of a first quest experience, even though it wasn't guided that way. But man, life got really simple. It's, you have a backpack, there's some other folks you're here with. You get up in the morning, you have some breakfast, you pack your backpack, you take care of the camp a bit, and then you start walking for about 7 hours, And so it's in just an amazing area. And I've always had a love for mountains. Well, always is a bit of an overstatement. Michigan doesn't have mountains like Colorado has mountains, but when I came out to Colorado, there are two things that kind of really shook me up. One was the vastness of the spaces where you can see for about 12 zip codes in any direction, a little bit further east of the Rockies and further west of the Rockies as well. But coming in, I'd never been in an environment like that before. So that actually really felt physically disturbing in a way. But then the other was just being in the mountains, and that felt like being home to me. So there is a part of choosing to go on this trek was choosing to really be immersed in the mountains. That's the whole reason why I did that. So I felt like I was learning from the mountains, doing that. And
brings me
then
that John Muir quote. I must go to the
yeah,
mountains and hear the news.
yeah. So I've got a similar quote that hangs on my office doorknob. That's right there. The mountains are calling, and I must go. So it's there's that. So um, yeah, that, and in many ways, I feel that was almost an injection, okay, you want to see more of the world? Here it is. Boom,
Yeah.
right front and center. And super, super helpful, humbling. I had a felt sense of how big life is and can be, but also how small in some ways an individual life or my life might be in the bigger context of things playing out. Hard not to get that message when you're surrounded by just huge peaks, and
Yeah.
expansive glaciers.
What a perspective, though, really a perspective on
Mhm.
life and where you are.
Yeah. So and that's where things I think really took a big turn and became way more intentional. Just touching on some other things to bring us to today. That that did help with the shift that I didn't know exactly what I needed, but what I needed, that was that. And I came back way more grounded, way more clear about what matters to me and how to cultivate that. And life continued to shift in some pretty big ways, but it provided a substantial foundation for everything that was to follow. And in a way, I knew nothing about Vision Quest or things of that sort at that point in time, but I knew in a very cellular level, the importance of a relationship with nature and the importance of listening, of really being in a way where you can take what's heading your way rather than trying to go get something or trying to effort out. So, the big move is slowing down and paying attention and listening. So, um, other things that followed after that, I came to see Bill Plotkin speak at an event in Boulder with David Whyte. It was called Nature, Poetry, and the Soul. And I had been studying and following some things around David Whyte for a little over a year and a half at that point. I thought, wow, he's going to be in Colorado. That sounds great. And nature, poetry, and the soul. That sounds great. I kind of know what's meant by nature and poetry. The soul part, I can get a little bit edgy when I hear things being named as soul. It's like, well, what is that? Is it a religious thing? What does that person mean? I just lots of question marks coming up. But I knew enough about David Whyte and his work that's like, I'm in, let's go. And my wife Mary at the time, we decided we'd do that, and didn't know anything about Bill Plotkin. And Friday night was David Whyte, Saturday was David Whyte, was great. Sunday it was gorgeous outside, but it was when Bill was going to be speaking. It's like, well, I don't really know. Super nice outside. We've been sitting inside for a long time, so almost didn't even go. Yeah, and then we decided we would go, and if we decided during the time, we'd take a respectful break and not come back. And but it was super engaging, and Bill spoke about just things having to do with formalizing or leaning into crossing of thresholds and rites of passage and relationship with nature. And at the end of that, really, Mary and I both were talking about whether or not to go on a quest, and we decided each of us really wanted to. And so at that point, what we did rock, paper, scissors to see who's going to go on the quest first and who's going to stay home with the kids. And she won. So she went first, and then I went the year after that. And
Really?
yeah, it's kind
Oh,
of how we both
so
got further into that.
together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And difficult, to go out and then integrate back in. How was that? Sort of a year apart and going out and
Oh,
yeah.
it was just it yeah, you mean well, yeah, that was an interesting thing. So she went, there are some pretty big things that were moving, and some of the things that she felt were important, I certainly respected, to just keep quiet, to keep kind of gestating, with it. So that was kicking off a number of things for her. Um, and I couldn't know, not that not only did I not know what she was bubbling with, but I also really didn't know as much about the experience, until I went on my own.
Mm, mm,
And
mm.
uh, it turns out it's kind of serendipitous. We didn't quite see this until maybe, I don't know, maybe 10 or 12 years later, long after we had gone on our quest and long after we had both become guides. we went back to where we had this quest. We both knew we were generally in the same area, just outside of Telluride. And but we were hiking up in the area, and I said, "Well, I'll show you where I was on my solo." And she said, "Oh, I'll show you where I was," you know. And so we just walked along, and then we were kind of cracking up because we're kind of heading to the same place, and we were probably like our solo spots were probably in a huge mountainous area, you know, maybe 30 yards, you know, from each other in a way that was like kind of out of out of where people might go. So that was kind of interesting, you know, kind of serendipitous there.
Wow. And have
Um,
you got a new definition of soul, or your own definition of soul?
well, I did on that first quest that I went out on. I remember there was this conversation about ceremonies, and then also really coming to see and know aspects about what your gifts are to the world, and different. It's not needing to be definitive and got a hold on it and done, put it in a box and put a ribbon on it. It's not like that, but it's more of something like something to be within the zip code of it all. You know, do you know what that might be? And I remember I got really irritated, you know, as the more we talked about it, because I thought, what the hell is that for me? It's like, how come I don't know? What is that? And it's like, I can't believe that I really can't articulate that. So I got really amped up, and going to sleep that night, it was, you know, we were up on the side of the mountain at that time, and I was super frustrated. And so I laid out some intentions, you know, just kind of going to sleep about that, and just wanting to see whatever I could directly about it, you know, and it took me a while to like get to sleep. But when I woke up, um, there were two things. There was one thing that was just right in my view was it was a word called pathfinder, and it had just been like boosh, just right up in front of me. And but the idea was um, working with others to actually support them in finding their own way and their own authorship into the world in ways that bring their artistry out, and being able to help to navigate, you know, the journey in and towards all of that. And that's what Pathfinder was. And I could see how I had been doing that for quite some time, and doing that actually with a lot of the business work that I'd been doing too. And so Pathfinder was with me like the next morning, and I felt like it was something direct, and also more of an inquiry, kind of a kickoff into more of it. Like what is that to be?
Follow that path.
Yeah, exactly. And um, so that was there was a little bit of there was that big important learning from the experience on the quest with that. There was also something that was happening over the mornings where I was where I had my tent, which is off to the side from kind of the main part of things. Um, Over the course of 3 mornings, each morning I woke up and I found something that seemed to kind of go together with each of these things. And one was I found this very colorful, I still have it here at home, but a colorful polished rock that was had a variety of colors in almost layers, like, and it had been polished. It's like, this is not, you know, indigenous to this mountainside, but it was in the shape of a heart, and it was incredibly vibrant, and it matched this imagery thing that I had created in an earlier exercise before we even got to the camp. And I thought it really shook me up in how that was. And then later found a stand that would sit on, and then there was a very wild um, face of sorts that was in the area that kind of sat on top of the rock, and the three kind of came together as one. I thought, wow, that is it just felt like more of hey, do you want to go into a different world and explore, you know, some things that are here if you'd like to connect with them. And you know, in some ways almost a guide, in some ways more like an opening. in some ways just supportive of imagination and intuition, so um,
Beautiful.
that too seemed to kick off something that was bigger and took place way longer than the experience of the quest, just continued over the years to come.
I can imagine. But what beautiful symbols. I mean, you saw them, they were seen and how, yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah.
oh, beautiful.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I'm grateful for that.
And my experience, and I know you might probably elaborate on this, but my experience is definitely of you as a pathfinder, because one thing I really appreciate is whatever person, anybody's starting point, it's their truth, and you're very respectful of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is one of the things I feel it's a gift to me to be able to be with folks and to be able to hear and see more of who they are, what they may be going through, and through the listening, maybe have some idea of what might be supportive, but um, at the very same time, really trying to be attentive. It's not my agenda, it's what's being offered up, and what choices will this one before me make, but maybe helping to see some choices.
But that heart is sort of like how you listen. You listen with your heart and sort of see the lovely colors and all the different colors and layers of somebody, actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's been a real teacher for sure. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And so from that, yeah.
So maybe a couple quick things to bring us up to today. So after the first quest that I went on, it was really moving for me. I'd never really done anything like that, or anything structure supported in ways that were held in the way that the quest was. And Bill was my guide. Um, there was another wonderful co-guide, and we got into a number of conversations even coming down the mountain where um, there were questions about, hey, at that time there weren't as many men who were guiding, and would I be interested in wanting to guide? And I thought, wow, it just felt like such an honor, just to be asked about this, to get into the inquiry. And at the same time, I'm thinking, I'm still coming down the mountain. Like there's just, it's not quite sure what's next here.
Pathfinder, it's like you named
Yeah, yeah. So, but I became super interested in that, and then started guide training just as quickly as I could, which is probably like a matter of months, and then started guiding and completed the apprenticeship program through the Animus Valley Institute, which is awesome, and was part of the Animus Valley Institute organization for about 10 years. And while I was doing all of that, I was also doing work. At that time, for the most part, I was still working at Hewlett-Packard, working at Hewlett-Packard, and still doing a number of business-related things while guiding. And for a while, it was kind of hilarious in hindsight, but I felt like what I was doing with guiding and my relationship with nature was super precious to me, and I could see how helpful it is for other people. But I also thought maybe I need to keep these worlds a bit separate here because of my own thoughts and projections about, an engineering-oriented culture and all sorts of things that kind of come from an understandable myth. But what I discovered is the more I started talking about it with friends, is where it was easiest and first place to start, is more people became interested. And so it was really, after a while, it was really kind of funny. I'd be in the oddest of places and people would say, well, can you tell me more about what you're doing out on the land there? I mean, like really curious. And then I just realized, hey, the only person that needs to keep this separate is me, so what am I doing? And so I started to really incorporate more of what I was learning from the work into the work that I was doing in business, corporate, and startup surroundings. And for me, it is not a big jump at all. it's really being grounded in the fact that the work is with people, and so, and I just happen to have a fair amount of a background in being with folks in a business context, and I see all of that as just the place where this is the practice field, and so how are we, stepping further into our humanity in the work context that that we're a part of as a part of that, and often that's where things would really get started. People would come, I would help, whether it was as a business team lead or senior person inside an organization, or later as a coach or facilitator, or just somebody helping to try to bring some organized structure to an effort that had a shared common purpose with the people who wanted to do something together.
So how
But
did what were the little transition points, or how did you gradually introduce it? What were you doing different that you weren't doing before? Was it the questions you were asking, or the framework, or the context, or?
in some ways I feel like there might have been three things that were all kind of colluding to come together, and it wasn't strategic choice on my part. It was just more of like seeing these things open up more directly. But the three things would be, well, in some ways, there's a bit of a backdrop of a lot of the earlier work that I was doing at Hewlett-Packard had to do with business strategy, new business creation, a number of things that would look at analyzing situations, coming up with a thesis of what a successful business movement might be, and then helping to orchestrate things so that a business model can get up and running, and then see how we doing and what are we learning. And all of that kind of driven from the head, a good chunk of it for sure. And then getting to this place where you can have great ideas and awesome strategy, but if it's not, connecting with people, and if it's not bringing the people who are part of it really alive, then at best it's going to be an underachievement. And so I started to look at things more upside down. Of, hey, there are some really important things around business, and business can actually bring about a really positive contribution. And part of it can actually be almost like a canvas upon which art lands, and good things might ripple out further into society. But to do that, you need to listen and be paying attention, not just to your own idea about business, but to other people as human beings, and that includes people in the business and beyond the business. So, there's more of a. So I started to look at what is the impact to people, and what happens if we really start to prioritize the aspirations, the intentions, the feelings, the impact, of what's actually being tried, and how it might be morphed, refined to align, more directly. So part of it was leaning further into people, stepping further away as strategy as primary, stepping away from that to say it's a good point. It's not, we're not done yet. Let's go look at, people. Another part was paying more attention to the way people were speaking, the emotions that were involved, actually calling out more emotions, and doing it in ways where it was respectful. It wasn't like, so tell me what you're really feeling. It wasn't boom, blunt statement. It's no, finding ways of actually people being able to express whatever's going on for them, but being able to bring that above the table and have it be part of the mix. And then there was just this part when it came to nature of almost having nature there as a partner at the table to be able to offer some things. And in some cases, I don't feel like I was indirect or trying to be manipulative, but there were a number of things at different times where we invite people out into a natural setting, and to explore a question with nature in ways that they probably hadn't done for a long, long time. And and saying that's just part of what we're doing in this activity, of working on our strategy, and then having people come back and share what's really there with a very authentic voice, with dropping the pretense or the positioning or the trying to get it right, all that kind of off to the side, and really saying whatever is there to be said. So having nature as a partner in all this just became more of a natural thing. And what I discovered was there are ways by which we can do that where it's not, there may be moments of seems kind of weird, but for the most part, especially after the experiences, many come back with more of a feeling of, I'm so glad that we could do that. And it's more of a letting something happen, rather than trying to, and never making it about forcing people to, here's what you need to do. It's just more, here's what's on tap. If you decide to do something different, that's okay too. But
Using there, isn't
but
it?
seeing the receptivity of that's great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And sort of this part of them, that sort of the knowing that it's going to be okay, or the trusting. There's a, like, it is, if we are doing work on strategy, on a program, on leadership, there is some people are generally open-minded. They have that, like, we're going to do this. Okay, there might be some sort of resistance, but there's some sort of permission to
Yeah,
experiment and play, isn't there?
that's
But
right.
that's lovely, and the nature of just being the purity or the authenticness that it sort of inspires, and just
Yeah. And
felt experience as well.
yeah, and there's something I think about, kind of setting the container of doing it in a way where this is what we're going to do, or that's what we have on tap for the next hour, say, this is it, and it's okay, and then saying here's how we'll do it, and kind of giving clear steps. And there's a bit of, almost like a bit of a judo move of, hey, there's clear structure. There are some steps to it, so people have a sense of how to do it. Many folks who might be anxious, some might be, now, how do I get it right? Almost subconsciously, it's often subconsciously. And so if there's something that's simple that's laid out, then people can start to feel a little bit more at ease of, I know how to do this, I can do it. And even often in some of these things that I might offer up, I'll remind folks that a lot of what we're about ready to do, they most likely did when they were kids, in their backyards and in the woods. And so it is a giving of permission, and kind of embracing playful, imaginary, no chance that you'll ever get it wrong. Mhm.
Just the
And
exploration of that, and the
yeah,
little, and of course, in a strategic way, that is going to create ideas. That is going to free
yeah,
our minds and our hearts.
yeah,
Wonderful.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Those are some of the most rewarding times, actually, because I feel like for me, in setting those kinds of things up, I feel like my next move after doing that is get out of the way. Because it's like, now it's up to them, and just let them be them, and let nature be with them, and we'll see how they come back.
So your role now in with Reboot, where's your focus and energy?
Well, there's still kind of these three different domains of coaching and supporting. The vast majority, although not entirely, the vast majority are folks in the startup world, co-founders, CEOs, senior leadership team folks, um, also members of the venture capital community, just folks who are providing the capital for a number of these ventures, and doing it in a way where there's a underlying portion of, if we do more of this work, there's a chance that the whole ecosystem might move towards something that's just a movement towards greater health. Um, and along with the coaching, there's, as you had mentioned just at the top here, I'm often designing experiences for leadership teams, or in some cases whole organizations, in ways that can help them um, shift or step further into what they'd love to bring forth. Also, often it involves how we might see how we're getting in our own ways. Part of being human, just competing commitments at play of, hey, I'm trying to be really good at doing XYZ, and hadn't really quite seen that might keep me from doing this other thing that I really want, so we do that as part of growing up, I feel. And then the third part is still guiding quests or experiences out in nature. Had some really great fun in doing that. Over the course of the last few years, I've been working with two folks in particular, in at Texas A&M, where there's a program that was started by the Zachary organization and the sponsorship primarily of John Zachary. Um, it's actually a leadership program for undergraduates who are going through engineering programs there. And um, just trying to keep it brief, there was one of the folks from within the program reached out and asked if I'd be up for designing and offering a module that was similar or related to things having to do with a quest-like experience or and pretty much nature-based. And I thought, what? That's amazing, you know. So I really enjoyed doing that. I've done that with them, and each year we've had a significant shift due to a number of different things, often mostly weather, and this year pandemic. You know, so we just completed the module a bit over a month ago, and it was held virtually. But they did go out, for instance, in the morning walk and had a conversation in nature and came back with amazing things. We did a fire ceremony over Zoom in ways that were, you know, super. So, you know, still there are a number of ways of bringing in nature and the connection and our belonging, the fact that we've always belonged as a member of the natural community. Um, that's part of the coaching and the other business related work for sure.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I like that. Actually, I think the sort of actually online work has encouraged a lot of people to take self-responsibility in
Yeah,
terms
yeah,
of their own development and self-generated. I think it's actually
yeah,
a good facilitation tool.
yeah,
So
yeah,
when you're working with you know, venture capitalists and the entrepreneurs, and you're saying, you know, like in terms of their own, they can make a, you know, contribution. Do they come in with, I want to, for my own business, and then going into my own development, or, you know, or is it like you say, and then
yeah.
by understanding themselves more and feeling more connected in that respect and more integrated and whole, then it's sort of like seeing that changes their vision of how they can contribute to the world as well.
It's a great question. Um, from my experience, what I see is there aren't any just couple ways where this happens. It's more of many, many, many different ways, many different paths, you know, to have this happen. But what what seems to be the case, in maybe overly simplified ways, is there's something that they know they would like to have some help or support with. And sometimes that can be with a business context, sometimes it can be with colleagues with respect to relationships. Um, Sometimes it can be, um, hey, I started this to do XYZ. Now I see that we're not doing exactly that or quite that or not that at all, you know, and I'm wondering dot, dot, dot. And, you know, so but it begins with something that's known that they'd like to bring attention to. And and that's where we go. That's where we start. But then that opens up into more of an inquiry into where am I? Who am I? What's my part in this? And really looking at agency in a number of ways without fault, and starting to reconnect. And in some ways, I reconnect with what matters. And sometimes that's hard, okay, because often in that work is, well, I think I should be, you know, from how I grew up, from my family, from my mentors, from people I idolize. It's just, I should, and but we get to inquire into that, and then through that discover where I really am. And then there's a way of coming out with greater alignment from all of that, and having that be a part of the work, but also having that be in my relationships, which also then brings back, you know, the world. And often, not for everyone, I don't force this on anybody at all, but for some, part of that work is including time in nature. And because of that, then often what goes forward is more of a direct relationship with nature or cultivation of the impact that they or their work might have with nature. So um, yeah, the ripples go out pretty far, you know, beyond themselves and the business world and relationships and community.
Yeah. And I mean, you experienced it in your own journey as one of, your success and working hard and that hard work, and then this feeling of, oh, I don't know what it is, but misalignment. I mean, that's in many respects the natural human journey, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. It's
So we
just
can't
on that.
avoid it. Do we try, what is our role here? Do we lessen the dip? Is it about actually encouraging bosses to recognize when people come in the business and have that? And so, like your boss did, give you that time, to recognize
Yeah.
this is part of our human soul journey. It's not
Yeah.
wrong, or it's just, it has allowing it to happen.
Yeah. What that brings up for me, just you're naming it this way, is I think it's really valuable, say it that way. If we can look at our life as something where we're in the process of coming out and living out loud, but at the same time, unlike a lot of how it might have been in our education or in our early work or maybe in our work today, it's not all about performance and what are we going to produce, although those are important things. It's if we can look at it more as a conversation and we're doing our best at every moment, um, then can we kind of come or find our ways into hearing or listening or being in the conversation where there's something more that's coming my way that's not just within my own head, just my own thoughts. And so for me, that brings up questions like, well, what are the practices, that support us? And different things for different people. But having a practice that is an opportunity to be in a conversation that is with more than what's within my head, that can inform, what might be here for my life, or more in my next step, or something that might be ready to die or stop. Some things of that sort. Can I be present enough to hear that, to take that in?
And what are your practices?
That really helped me. One big one, of course, is time in nature, and that shows up in several different ways. And in the more day-to-day way, in some ways, we have a dog. My dog's name's Otis, and Otis will tell me it's time to go, dude. End of the day. So going for walks, but we're lucky enough to be able to go out into some pretty wild places not too far from the house here, and so I can just be and kind of reset and just kind of I don't know if Otis just shook his collar just as we were speaking. It's kind of funny, but that I can listen that way and kind of get the day into perspective in that sense too. It's not just thinking and reflecting, but it's actually opening up to be what's there right now, and that then shifts everything. And then kind of what I've been trying to do every quarter, and it's been hit and miss in some ways, but to try to take more of like a long weekend out on my own, and sometimes with others if there's somebody that's like really right in a place that'd be a good fit, to go spend some time out in some more vast wilderness and just be on my own. Super helpful. Kind of right-sizes the world around me. And then another really simple one that I've been encouraging a number of folks to like lean into or consider is gratitudes on a regular basis. And the idea with gratitudes for me that I feel is super helpful for others, especially in this time, is if I can name something that brought some joy or brought some levity, brought me alive, today. If I can remember that and name it, then I can be in connection with it again. And in doing that, in that simple moment, I'm also reconnecting with what I'm for. What is actually something that is of alignment, for me. And to have those doses on a regular basis helps to kind of fuel me. I feel like it's a helpful it's a recovery move for a lot of what's super challenging, in our times right now, and be an affirmation of I'm still alive and there's a lot to enjoy and to appreciate, that can then bring the best of me into whatever's ahead for the rest of the day. So, gratitudes are helpful.
And I love Rick Hansen. He talks about the 20-second marinating in the good stuff in conclusion, like the actually feeling grateful, sort of, and really feeling like being immersed in it.
Yeah.
How it changes the neural pathway. Not just
that's right.
A gratitude,
That's
but
right.
the thoughts, but actually we can really, if we really feel it. And I suppose I'm looking back to your own sensual senses experience of the pine needs or the sea. I'm noticing the
Yeah.
time, and I'm just going to say I'm very grateful for it.
Thanks, Penny. Really wonderful to be with you. Yeah.
Oh, and
And I just wanted to, it's a bit of a, wanted to just circle back when I had quickly referenced on when I was out on my first quest. Bill Plotkin was one of the guys, but I hadn't named. It's Carrie Brady, who was the other. I just wanted to honor her as well, and her support and what that meant to me too. So just wanted to name that too.
it's
And
lovely.
really wonderful to be with you and take the moment to just kind of share all of this together.
Thank you so much. And I haven't even given the listeners the taste of the bear story.
That's right.
I'll let you go.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll tell it on my tell it in as I sign off. But thank you so much.
Thank you. Really wonderful to be with you. Take
See
care.
you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
So he's gone, but the bear story, and that's a cuddly bear. It might sound like a drinking bear or bare hand in my Kiwi accent. But when we talked last week, we were going to do the interview, but we ended up chatting, and he came across a bear, mother bear, and had an encounter. So much so that he said he could have touched her on her nose, and but he just, he kept calm. He said it was a beautiful moment of respecting each other's needs and boundaries. And what was really lovely is that he went back home and he's got his phone. He was able to get data about his heart rate and things. And he said his heart rate had just stayed the same. An example of Jim being aligned with what he says and what he does. So I'll put a pause here and see you back for the next Earth Converse podcast. Go out to nature and enjoy it one conversation